We want to take a closer look now at defense, a key part of not only the government's foreign policy, but also security here at home. Stéfanie von Hlatky is director of the Centre for International and Defense Policy at Queen's University. She joined us from Kingston, Ontario. The Defense Minister, Stéfanie, called this a new vision for Canadian armed forces. Would you agree?
I would agree in certain respects. What struck me as particularly new in terms of the vision is the strong emphasis placed on military personnel, questions of diversity, and the importance of gender perspectives in operations.
And in terms of the operations of the armed forces?
Yes, well, that also applies. I noticed the emphasis on Resolution 1325, which is a UN resolution to integrate gender perspectives into operations and the Women, Peace and Security agenda. In terms of specific operations, we had very little to go on. So this defense policy wasn't so much about updating the Canadian people about current missions or upcoming missions. It was more about long-term planning.
And how do you think it's going to change, I guess, the way the armed forces look, put it that way?
Well, the composition of the armed forces is bound to change. You may have noticed a quite ambitious target when it comes to recruiting women. Currently, there are 15% of women in the armed forces, and the Chief of the Defense Staff has set a target of 25% by 2026. So that's an increase of 1% per year since that commitment was made.
Do you think that's achievable?
I think that's achievable if you look at the full career cycle. Certainly recruitment is a very important part, but the Canadian Armed Forces will have a challenge when it comes to retention. So it's not only about bringing women in, it's about keeping them in the armed forces as well.
What does this new defense policy mean in terms of Canada's ability to deploy now? Will it mean that Canada can, in fact, deploy more robust forces, perhaps be engaged in more locations around the globe?
It's an interesting way to put it, because it's true, there's two ways to look at this and decisions to deploy the Canadian Armed Forces. You can strive to be in multiple missions at the same time, or you can strive to make the strongest impact possible in a very limited number of missions. Now, what the defense policy statement tells us is that the Canadian Armed Forces can sustain 2 major deployments and then can add on another major deployment, but for 1 rotation. And these major deployments mean about 1,500 troops for each of those major missions. That means that we still have quite a bit of wiggle room when we look at the current operations, or the current major operations, if you will. Canada is deploying troops to Latvia as part of Enhanced Forward Presence, NATO's deterrence mission. And Canada is also involved in coalition operations against ISIS in Iraq. And right now, there's 450 troops set to deploy to Latvia, more or less, and about 800 military personnel for the mission in Iraq. So when you look at what was outlined in the defense policy, that means that there's quite a bit of latitude there, either in terms of bolstering these missions or looking to other operations in the future.
But some analysis has also suggested that even with bolstering the numbers, in fact, Canada's ability to deploy is basically going back to what it was about a decade ago, that this is not really a significant increase. Is that fair?
It's fair to say that the increase in military personnel that's planned over several years is not going to fundamentally change Canada's ability to deploy, especially considering that a lot of the recruitment will focus on more specialized positions in cyber and intelligence.
Talk to me a little bit about the money. When people say there's going to be an increase of something like 70% over the next 10 years, that sounds like a lot of money. Is it really?
It's unpredictable is what it is, because it sounds impressive when you're looking at the increases over a decade or even 2 decades, but a lot can happen, including the economy. And of course, this is what happened last time when the Harper government put out its defense policy statement in 2008. There was a global recession. And so that fundamentally changed the defense plans and the investment plans. The same thing might happen this time. We also have to look at the electoral cycle. But at least the signal is encouraging that the Canadian Armed Forces will see an increase in their budget, and that the major equipment that is so badly needed will finally come.
there's still a lot of questions about equipment and procurement. Tell me what you think is missing from this policy now.
Well, on the procurement front and on other fronts, there's still a lot of major decisions that we're all really waiting to find out what the outcomes are. So, of course, the fighter jet is one of those big ticket items. But also when it comes to the missions, we were hoping, a lot of us defense observers, that there might be a signal as to where the Canadian Armed Forces would go in terms of peace support operations. And it seems that this decision will be delayed further. Now, there is a hard deadline, if you will, in November, because Canada will play host to an international peacekeeping conference in Vancouver. So it'd be nice before then to know exactly where the 600 troops will be deployed to. But those who were hoping for more clarity on this point during the announcement of the defense policy were disappointed.
I thank you very much for your expertise on this.
Thank you so much for having me.